Greetings from Toronto, this is Janina Cortez. Our group is here to present our news article sentiment analysis. This task required us to choose two online news outlets in which we have CBS News and the New York Times. According to Ad Fontes Media Rating, CBS News' reliability score is 48.98, while its bias score is at negative 3.84. For the New York Times, reliability score is at 46.22 and a bias score of negative 8.20. Although I would like to highlight it was considered to have developed national or even worldwide reputation for thoroughness. So generally, we chose both of these news outlets because a reliability score above 32 is considered as good, which both already passed, while bias scores closer to 0 is deemed most neutral or balanced. So who are the team members? We have our programmer, Kelvin Pinto, our business analysts, yours truly, Janina Cortez, and Ozan, and lastly, we have our data analyst, which is me, Patel. For the tasks, these are the following. Read and process the top stories RSS feed, iterate and web scrape the article text from each article, perform sentiment analysis on each article, and lastly, provide a visualization of the news articles. For the tools that we used, we have, for web scraping, Python, Beautiful Soup, database, MongoDB, and of course, visualization, we used Tableau. For the web application, we have Flask. For front end, we have HTML, JavaScript, jQuery, and Ajax. Lastly, for text processing tools, we used NLTK and TextBlob from Python.
Thank you, Janina. I'm Kelvin Pinto, and I'll be explaining the MongoDB database, the data model, as well as the web scraping code. So we have 4 collections within the database, which is CBS News and NY Times, which stores the information of the news articles, CBS word count, as well as NYT word count, which stores the word count of the articles description. Moving on to the web scraping code, we have the method scraping articles, which scrapes the data from the website, RSS feed, and stores it into MongoDB. It also calculates the polarity as well as the sentiment and adds it to the database collection. Next, we have the word count method, which counts the number of occurrences of each word and stores it in the MongoDB collection. So coming to the backend code, we have imported necessary libraries such as Beautiful Soup, TextBlob, regular expression, string, and NLTK required for our web scraping methods as well as the word count. So we have the scrape articles method, which takes the URL of the RSS feed, data collection, as well as the word count collection. It drops the collections to avoid any duplicate entries to the database. Then it creates a GET request to the URL that we provided and stores the response in NewsGet. Then it passes the NewsGet got content to the Beautiful Soup function to scrape the data from that response. Then we have find all function to get the only XML tag item and the data within that tag. Here we have a empty list called news articles. Then from the news, we scrape the data, which is title, description, link, and publish date, and store it in the dictionary news article. And then we use TextBlob function to find the polarity of each article and store it in the news article dictionary using the key polarity. And next we find the sentiment of each news article using the if loop. We have if the polarity is greater than 0, then the sentiment is positive. If it is less than 0, then the sentiment is negative. Otherwise it's neutral. Then we append each news article to our empty list, which is news articles, and then store the description of each article within total description variable. Then we create a data frame to store the articles information, and we insert the data frame to our MongoDB collection. Then we call word count function to calculate the count of words and their occurrences within the description of each articles. So we have the function here. It takes the description from the above function and it replaces the characters matching the regular expression as well as the quotes. Then it translates each character to its one-to-one mapping translation. Next, it divides the string into substrings and creates a words list using word tokenize function. This line of code stores the stop words of English, and then it creates a list of words that are not stop words. So if the word is not in stop words, the filter word will be created. Then it lemmatizes and creates a list of words, and it creates a list of only words that are occurred once, and it will not store the repeated occurrences. And it also stores the count of words. Next, we have most common function, which takes only the 100 words from the list in the descending order of their occurrence and returns it to the above function, scrape article function. It then inserts the dictionary of word count to our word count collection. Let's move on to the front end of the web application. We could say that there is no data available in the table as well as there is no data available in the MongoDB cluster. So when we hit on scrape button, so when we click on scrape data from New York Times, it scrapes the data from New York Times as well as from the CBS News. So now if we refresh the MongoDB collection, we could see that there are 4 collections created which has data as well as a count. Thank you. Now I'll pass this on to Meet to explain the front-end web application as well as the working of the project.
Thanks, Kelvin. My name is Mehmet and I'll be showing you the flow of the code and the demonstration of our web application. Starting with the codes, main.py is our main program file. Here we start off with importing required libraries. First of all, our important library is Flask, which is used for rendering the web application. Request to request the HTML from the HTML data from the link, and the beautiful soup, which is used for parsing the HTML files and the data. Next important import over here is the Mongo class from db.py file. So this file contains the Mongo class, which has environment variables. Now these environment variables are fetched from .env file, where const string variable is removed as it is confidential. So it will fetch all these variable environment values into this file, and these fetched values will be used through this class in main.py. Moving ahead from the Flask application, the index route has on that page we have a list of articles and their sentiments listed in one page, and there are 2 sources, which are CBS News and New York Times News. Third page, which is the scrape route. On this page we have buttons to scrape the data, and in the backend the data is scraped from the websites and stored in the database. And the third page, which is about route, over here we have data about our information about our team and about the project. Moving ahead, in these 2 routes, which are get data NYT and get data CBS, these routes actually are for displaying the list of entire database. I mean the record. After we have displayed the records from the database, we have these two functions, which are New York Times and CBS News. These 2 functions utilize scrape articles function, which is explained by Kelvin, to scrape the data, and by providing their respective variables, which is URL, data column, and word count column. So using their respective variables, they call scrape articles, and according to those variables, the function scrape articles scrapes the articles from the given URL. And for word count, this function is utilized, which is again this was explained by Kelvin. Moving to the demonstration, let's check it live. Now this is our database on MongoDB. Right now we don't have any data over here. If we load the page, even on the front end, we don't have any data displaying. And over here as well, as you can see, there is no data. So we go to scrape page, and these two buttons are there, and pressing those will scrape the data and store them to the database. So this button is for CBS News and this button is for New York Times. So after we have clicked both, we'll go to our database and reload again. And over here, we'll go back to home and we will reload. As you can see over here, 4 tables are created, CBS News and New York Times. These two tables contain articles and the data. And CBS WC and NYT WC are the tables containing the word count of the articles. And coming here, as you can see, the index page now has a list of articles, the information about the articles, the polarity, and the sentiment for both the websites, both news sources, which are CBS News and New York Times. Now, polarity is a range, gives a range from -1 to 1, 1 being the most positive, and negative means the most negative, and 0 is the neutral. So the article which has a score more towards 1 will be more positive comparatively, and articles with the score more towards the -1 will be more negative. It is just intensity of the sentiment. Thank you.
And this is Ozan. I will be continuing with the data visualization of our project. So we have done a sentiment analysis of world news by 2 news sources, which are the New York Times and CBS News. And in the word count analysis, we can see that in New York Times, these are the most frequent words, as the darker colors and bigger boxes mean that they are more frequently appeared in the articles. So some examples of these are official, say, vaccine, many, could. And for the CBS words, same applies here. The darker color and the bigger box means they are more frequently appeared in the articles. And at a first glance, the first inference we can make is that the CBS News would focuses on the more political world news, where we see words as president, security, world, government, national protest, militants, Taliban, and surgeon, US, etc. Meanwhile, the New York Times has those news, and it also has more variety of news, as we can see some other words that doesn't exist in CBS's word count, such as school and vaccine, AstraZeneca, face, coronavirus, challenge. So we can safely say that the New York Times has more variety of news, meanwhile CBS News more focuses on political world news. And moving on to sentiment analysis, for the New York Times, we can see that it has 51% neutral sentiment and 27% positive sentiment and 21% negative sentiment. So it has a lot of neutral sentiment, but we can take a look at actual article numbers, and we see that it has 14 negative articles and it has 18 positive articles. So overall, it has a positive sentiment, which means that most of the articles they have published are positive. So looking at the CBS News, we see that it has 70% neutral sentiment and 20% positive sentiment and 10% negative sentiment. So when we take a look at the actual numbers, we can see that it has 5 negative articles and 10 positive articles. So the difference is CBS News has even more neutral sentiment in articles, but in the ones where they don't, they are even more positive, as there are twice the number of positive articles than the negative articles. So the overall sentiment is positive. And in conclusion, we didn't have metadata, but we can say that both of these news sources, the New York Times and the CBS News, are generally neutral in their world news section, but when they are neutral, they are generally positive. And thank you for listening to our sentiment analysis project.